You can all be seated. Welcome. Good to see you all here for our couples conference. Hello to Harvest Riverside. Hello to Harvest Kumalani on the island of Maui as well. Glad you're all with us. I remember having a conversation with Cliff Barrows once about marriage. He was married many years. His first wife went to be with the Lord, then he remarried in his later years. But he said there were 8 words that would transform any marriage. And the words are, I'm sorry, I was wrong, will you forgive me? And that's pretty good. Because, you know, sometimes when we apologize, they're really lame apologies, right? Something along the lines of, look, I know that you felt what I said was wrong, but that's not an apology. Or I'm sorry if what I said hurt you, but what I was really saying was, no, it's I'm sorry, I was wrong, will you forgive me? And then he said, and 3 more words really help, which are, here's my credit card. No, here's my, no, I love you. I love you. Those are the other words. And it's such important things to remember. We're going to hear from 2 people that really know what they're talking about. They're experts in this field. They're going to help us understand so much more about how to have a strong and blessed and lasting marriage. We've already introduced him, but Jeff and Shaunti, both are graduates of Harvard University. I'm a graduate of Harbor High School, but they do extensive research on this, and what they share with you is based on the Word of God, and it's going to be a blessing. But before they come up for 2 powerful back-to-back sessions, I think we must all wish my wife happy birthday. It's her birthday today. Kathy, come up. Just come up so I can personally sing. Are you going to make that gap? Okay. So I can personally sing happy birthday to you. And let's all sing, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Kathy. Happy birthday to you. Kathy Laurie. She's godly. She's wise. She's beautiful on the inside and the outside. And she's my best friend, and she's your friend. Those of you that know her as a friend. And so happy birthday, Kathy. And now let's hear more about strengthening our marriages. Let's welcome Jeff and Shaunti as they come.
Pastor, you're good. That was a very good illustration
of what we're going to talk about.
Of a
Do you mind
marriage.
if I just stand here the whole time while you're talking?
Unless, of course, your spouse hates talking to people or something. But that was good.
Fantastic. Yeah. So, thanks for coming back. I hope that. You had a good time and good conversation last night, and you didn't ask that question we gave you the right not to answer. So anyways, today we're going to be talking about the differences between men and women. The first half of the talk, Shaunti's going to lead it, helping the women understand what's going on inside of us as guys. And then the second half is going to be me sharing.
And I'll chime in.
And she'll chime in, and I'll chime in on hers. We always have to say this, at least I always have to, because at the beginning, she's going to be doing 90% of the talking. It's not that she's not letting me talk. It's just that's the way it works, because it's better to hear these things for women coming from another woman.
Yeah. We have discovered that over the years.
You're up.
So, okay, I have to also ask for the grace of how many women here participated in the virtual, what was it called? The Girl Talk event in July. How many of the women here heard my talk? Okay, we've got a few. I'm going to ask for your grace and your permission to do the exact same talk over again, if that's all right, or very similar, not exact, but very similar in some ways, because there are some crucial things that we don't understand about the person sitting next to us. And it's very core and very foundational. And the other thing, if you did hear that talk in July, your husband probably didn't. And one of the things that we have found over the years that makes a big difference, and let me get my timer up. We have a timer. That's very exciting. One of the things that we have found over the years that makes so much difference to this particular topic of understanding each other, we didn't know what the other person didn't know. And that itself is incredibly powerful once we realize, oh my goodness, I can believe the best because really, truly, the other person did not understand what a big deal something was, for example. So thank you for your grace on understanding that I'm going to be repeating a lot of the stuff from July. So let me get you started by telling you, just as a starting point for this whole thing, I have to tell you, I feel like doing this topic gives me the best sort of opening line in the world when I meet people at parties. Or like, you have that sort of stranger conversation with somebody you've just met at the office, or somebody on the airplane who says, what do you do? Or what do you do? And you have that kind of awkward conversation. And often I'll be sitting, next to a guy on the airplane or on the subway or whatever, and he'll say, so what do you do? And I say, I help women understand men. And it's hilarious, the looks on their faces. It was some of the looks on some of the men's faces here last night, because they're like, what are you going to tell them about us? And then, sometimes I get this reaction where the guy's like, we're really not that complicated. And here's the thing. Okay, ladies, seriously, raise your hand. And I know I can't see Riverside, but so everybody can see everyone. Ladies, how many women have heard a man say that? Seriously, everybody raise your hand if you are in that category. Okay, many of the women who have heard men say that, including many of you men who have said that, right? Ladies, guess what? It is not true. And there is so much depth and complexity. There is so much going on underneath the surface in the men in our lives that we don't realize is there, and it's impacting the relationship. It's impacting us every single day. And it is so crucial to understand this. Now, this doesn't, by the way, just so you know, there are applications for this far beyond marriage. We're not going to have a time to get into them in the time that we have, but far beyond just marriage. I mean, this is obviously, if there's anyone in here who's dating or wants to be dating, or how many of you work with a man? Any women work with men? Okay, how many of you have a son? Men are everywhere. It's really crucial for us to understand this. So just realize, as I'm going to be going through what we found in the research, we have now interviewed and surveyed more than 30,000 men and women over the last 17 years in order to bring this data to you, but realize that these are generalizations. And like I said last night, there are always exceptions. It usually is somewhere in the 75 to 85% range, but that means by definition, some of you, for your spouse, whether it's your husband or your wife, when Jeff and I do the other side, it won't necessarily apply to all things. Use it as a starting point. Okay, so the most important starting point for understanding what both of us are going to be talking about is that it turns out the most crucial reason for some of the missed signals is that men and women tend to have very, very different sets of primary insecurities running underneath the surface. And as a result, we have very different primary needs as a result. One of the things that illustrates this so well is that when Jeff and I were doing some of the initial research years ago, I saw this so clearly with a series of focus groups that we did. And we had one night where we had a group of college-age young men who were coming into a conference room for a focus group. And then the next night, we had a group of college-age young women, so sort of 20-year-old-ish, 21. And the first night, it was one of those conference rooms that have the whiteboards. You know the whiteboards on the walls with those doors that close over them? There were 2 sets of those, and I opened up one of them for the young men on the first night, and I told the guys, I really want to do something a little bit different tonight. I really want to just spend the whole evening talking about and charting on the whiteboard what are the things that most make you feel bad and what makes you feel great. When someone says this or they do this, it kind of hurts a bit, it hurts your feelings. Not that any 20-year-old guy is going to say, it hurts my feelings, but you know what I mean. Like, what are those things that kind of hurt, that don't feel so great? And then what are the things that light you up? What is it that when someone says this or does this, it feels awesome? Sort of our fears and our needs. And so we spent all evening on it. We got it all just right. They told me what to write. We erased things and wrote it again. And at the end of the night, I realized, whoa, we are way over time. We're out of time. The girls are going to be in here tomorrow night. I don't have time to erase this whole giant whiteboard, so let's just close the doors. So the next night, I'm in there with these college-age young women, same age, and I explain the whole thing, open up this whiteboard, and I say, we're going to chart fears and needs as girls. And this one young woman raises her hand, and she interrupts me. And she says, excuse me, I really object to this language. And I'm like, oh, okay. And she said, it's not our fears and our needs as girls. I mean, we're all just people, right? And we have the same fears, we have the same needs as people. And I said, okay, totally fine. Let's chart your fears and your needs as people. And so we spent all evening on it. We got it just right. They told me what to write, erased and rewrote. At the end of the night, I purposely left 5 minutes. You knew what I was going to do, right? I purposely left 5 minutes. And I said, hey, the guys were in here last night. Does anybody want to see what? Of course, the 20-year-old women are like, yes, I want to see it. So I opened up this whiteboard, and I stood back. And I watched their faces as their jaws were dropping open and their heads are swiveling back and forth because there was not one word the same. Not one. Except for, and, the, right? Like, not one. So, what was on the board? So, here's the key starting point. We've found in our surveys we've done the surveys from age 15 to age 75. And across all of these ages, for both women and men, for women, the question, the worry, the insecurity, however you put it, is basically, am I lovable? Am I special? Am I beautiful? Am I worthy of being loved for who I am on the inside? So we love to feel loved, right? And that lights us up. For the men, for the boys, and later as men, they're kind of like, feeling loved is nice, but it didn't make it on the board. And that for the guys, the question is totally different. The question is, am I able? Am I adequate? Do I have what it takes? Do I measure up? Am I any good at what I do on the outside? Totally different. Am I worthy of feeling loved for who I am on the inside? Am I any good at what I do on the outside? Those are two very, very different sets of primary insecurities and worries and questions, and it lends itself to two very different sets of primary needs. So for this session, from now on, talking about just the men, let's dive in to what that means for our men, and then we'll switch it. So for us as women, like I said, we love to feel loved, cherished, adored. That speaks to that insecurity question. And in fact, kind of feeling loved, that's kind of what we think is the whole point of having the relationship. Right? Like if you're not going to feel loved, what's the point, right? And it's this huge surprise for us to find out that for men, that's really not kind of the point at all. And 3 out of 4 men on our survey, said if they had to make a choice, and by the way, nobody would ever want to have to make this choice, okay? But if they had to make the choice, the men on the survey said, I would rather give up feeling that my wife loved me if I could just feel that she appreciates me, that she respects me, that she believes in me, that she trusts me, and that she admires me. And those things were far more important to the average man, even than feeling that his wife loves him. That is a big deal difference between men and women, right? And it gets us as women into so much trouble because we women, we're naturally good at showing love. Like, how ironic is that? Like, ladies, how many of you find, and this is not going to be 100%, right? How many of you find, and including the people at Riverside and Kumalani, raise your hands for this, how many women find that it comes kind of naturally to say the words, I love you, to your husband or your son or whatever? Just raise your hand. It's not going to be 100%. It's probably maybe 80% at least here. Most of us just find that those words come naturally. We say, honey, I love you. We do things that we hope he'll find are loving. And at the same time, did you want to say something?
Just to interject, statistically,
Yeah.
how you always say this about all of us need, we're in the statistics of if 80% said something one way.
Yes, and it's important, what Jeff is mentioning, is it's important for us to mention that both men and women both need to feel loved. We both need to feel appreciated. We're all insecure about everything, really, but we're talking about like the heartbeat stuff that is statistically most likely to cause some of these issues. And here's one of the issues, because we're working so hard to say, I love you, because that comes naturally to us, and we don't realize that at the same time, we might be criticizing him a lot. Or maybe we're questioning his decisions all the time. Or we're, I don't know, telling him what to do every now and then. Okay, you should see some of the faces of the guys in this room right now. There are so many men who are like vibrating, like, I can't nod. I'll get in trouble if I nod. It's hilarious, okay? I wish I could turn the camera on you and you could see some of the looks on the faces. It's great. But ladies, we do this and we don't realize that when we do things like, okay, here's a list of the 14 things you have to do with the kids while I'm out with my sister today, whatever that is, we are basically saying, no, you're not able. No, you're not adequate. And oh, by the way, what you do on the outside, it isn't good enough. And we have no idea, first of all, that that's what we're saying. And secondly, that this is this painful, emotionally painful thing for a guy because it's triggering a very different question than what ours is. So the first thing we need to understand, we really, really need to kind of grasp what is it that we can do, what is it that we do, that kind of hits that. It's like a raw nerve. And what is it that hits that nerve so that we can avoid it? How do we basically avoid sending that negative message? And then what do we do to send the positive message? What are those things? So the first thing we have to talk about is how do we avoid sending the negative message? Listen, the crucial thing about this, that to me is actually kind of the starting point that we kind of don't realize, is that It is any little day-to-day thing that we say or we do that tells a guy subtly, or maybe not so subtly, you didn't do it right. Or I think what you just did is inadequate. Because it says to him, I think you are inadequate. And it's little day-to-day stuff, what we think is minor stuff that doesn't even matter. Let me give you an example of this. Kathy back in the back said, you're going to tell that one story, right? And I'm like, okay, I will tell that one story. Because it's a silly little example that multiplied by millions is one of the reasons for some of these disconnects and hurting each other's feelings that we don't realize we're doing. So I was on a plane talking to the guy next to me. I should explain, I kind of interview every man I come across. I sort of feel bad for the man who's trapped next to me on the airplane for 2 hours, but it's really good data because you don't know who they are. They could be completely honest. And so I was talking to this gentleman, and we're having this conversation. He was telling me about his wife, and he kind of just looked defeated, I guess. Like his shoulders kind of slumped. I just felt kind of bad for him. And he said a phrase that I have heard so many times from so many men. And I had heard from Jeff in previous years, and I had no idea what Jeff was talking about. And I guarantee some of the women in the room, we've heard this phrase, and we didn't know what our husband meant by this. And this guy said, look, I love my wife, but nothing I do is ever good enough for her. Okay? Now, because of the research at this point, I thought I knew what he meant by that. And I said, can you give me an example? And he said, absolutely. I'll just tell you something that happened last night. And he told this story he said, we had friends over for dinner. The kitchen was a wreck. My wife had to run out to a meeting. And she said, honey, while I'm gone for the meeting, can you clean the kitchen so that when I come home, we can go right to bed? And he said, sure, no problem. He said, so I cleaned the kitchen. And she comes home from her meeting and kisses me on the cheek and looks over my shoulder into the kitchen and goes, and grabs a sponge and starts re-cleaning all the countertops. And he said, it just kills me that nothing I do is ever good enough for her. Okay, now I wish I could show you the women's faces. Because there are so many of us as women that when we hear that story, many of us, and this certainly was me, okay? This was totally me. Many of us, first 20 times I heard this, I'm internally going, dude, grow up. Like, that should not bother you. You are so oversensitive, And finally, after I heard this over and over and over, it was like God whacked me upside the head. And I finally realized, wait a minute. The reason I'm saying that should not bother you is that it wouldn't bother me. He's not me. He's wired very differently by a God who knew what he was doing. I asked this gentleman on the plane, is there anything that your wife could have done differently where you would have, received that differently? And he looked at me like I was nuts. And he was like, yeah, if she just would have appreciated what I tried to do. Like if I missed the crumbs under the toaster, she can clean it later when I'm not looking. And I realized again how often we unintentionally send that signal that we don't even realize that's painful of what you did on the outside wasn't good enough. You failed. And just not recognizing how big of a deal that is emotionally. Just remember that sort of whiteboard, that question in their hearts. So I wish I could go on about this forever, but I have to get to the other piece of this little puzzle, which is, okay, so if that's looking for the negative message and avoiding sending that, which is what you did on the outside wasn't good enough, that little minor thing, message, what is it that we send as a positive message? What is it that says to your man that I really, you've got this positive impact? What?
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
So as Shaunti is learning all of this stuff, and interviewing these men, the pieces are starting to come together for her. And so for about a 2-week period, she would kind of, at random points throughout our day when we'd cross paths, she'd say, you know, Jeff, I so respect you. Oh, okay, that's nice. And this happened time after time after time for about 2 weeks. And finally I went, you know, I gotta call a timeout on this one. I know what you're going for, and I appreciate it, but those particular words don't do it for me. I know it's like when you hear me say, I love you, you know.
That does it.
It says a lot.
It hits that internal question, am I lovable?
Exactly, yeah. But I so respect you doesn't. I can't help you as to what does, but that's not it. So she began a journey to figure out what is it.
I did. I was a little obsessed. I'm like, I've got to figure out what is it that you can say to a man that has the same emotional impact on him that I love you does to us. And I finally found it. Now, this was about 5 years ago, and I've been trying really hard to get the word out there. So you've probably heard this by now. So if you know the answer to this for sure, don't shout this out. But if you want to take a guess, I'm just curious, at least here in Orange County, ladies, take a guess. It's a small phrase that you can say to your husband that has the same emotional impact. Somebody said it. You were right.
That's good. We like that one too.
I know, I was doing an event in a big huge women's conference in a big stadium, and I asked the women to guess, and somebody shouted out, let's have sex.
Which will also work.
That in most cases will probably work too, but that wasn't what came out on the survey. I heard somebody say it. Believe it or not, it's thank you. Thank you for the littlest day-to-day things that you wouldn't even think would make such a difference. Like, thanks for noticing that the light bulbs were out and changing them. You know, thanks for putting gas in my car. Thanks for, you know, I had that early Zoom meeting and you took the kids and got them set up on virtual school so that I could do my meeting. Thank you so much. Like these little things, because here's what it says. It says, I noticed what you did on the outside. That's the first thing it says. And it says, and it was good. And I appreciate it. Like it fills up men in this really, really powerful way that we don't realize has such an emotional impact on them. Now, here's the thing that we have to kind of, we have to really grapple with something as women here at this point. Because there are many occasions when, without realizing it, we not only don't say thank you, we kind of twist it a little bit, and we think it's fine, or we think it's a compliment, and it's really not. You know, it's so funny. Because this is so important to guys, and I don't realize this, and many of us don't realize it, we just don't think to say it, like it's in our heads, but we just don't think to say it. I always would wonder why Jeff would say things like, you know, hey, I was running errands on a Saturday, he was working in the yard on a Saturday, and then maybe like Sunday morning, he would say, hey, did you notice I cut back the bushes? Yeah, I did. Like, yeah, I noticed. Right? And now all the women are going, okay, I've heard this before. And all the guys are resonating with this because this is really common. And we don't realize that half the time, not only are we not saying it like, we noticed, oh yeah, that looked nice. But then also sometimes, heaven help me, I do this, many of us do. When he would say things like that, I would go, yeah, I did. And by the way, did you notice that the holly bush was still kind of wonky? And I had no idea that not only wasn't a thank you, the guys are like, that's the no thank you. Because not only is that not appreciation in a man's mind. Now, we don't see it this way, ladies, but what matters, honestly, is how they're receiving these things. Because not only is it not a thank you to them, it would have been better if we would have said nothing. Because what we've just done is told them what you did on the outside wasn't good enough, right? We've pointed out that thing that's a problem.
Can I jump in for one quick second? Now, Shaunti is unduly harsh on herself on a lot of these things because she has applied what she's learned.
I was just trying to help. Right?
Find what works in your relationship. Thank you may be it. And you can never go wrong with thank you, but there may be some additional things that you can say. And for Shaunti and me, she knows a phrase that's kind of, it totally lights me up. I was a kid growing up in the 70s, and I would read comic strip, at the back of the newspaper when people read newspapers. And
actual newspapers?
And my favorite comic strip was Peanuts. I just resonated with the whole gang and all of that stuff. And Shaunti knows that. And there'd be times when I would do something, or I'd be feeling a little discouraged, or I did something that I was uncertain about. And she would say to me, "You're a good man, Charlie Brown." And I'll tell you, I'll run through a wall for her. I mean it. If you will practice these things, ladies, and share them with your husband and tell him how proud you are of him, he will do anything for you.
Yeah, it is so true. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of practical nuance here, because I hope you can see that a lot of this stuff is it's a practical outgrowth of what Pastor Josh talked about in his talk, right? It is, how do you actually do, for example, that love, that respect thing? What does that look like? Here's an example of a practical, not just the thank you or looking for what really says that to your man or your son, for example. But what happens, I know all the women in here are asking themselves, and so I'll address this directly. What happens when he did miss the holly bush? Or he didn't clean the kitchen right? What do you do, right? Are you just supposed to throw up your hands and say, well, he's so fragile, I can't say anything? No. So, and by the way, just as a quick note, that's the big misunderstanding. A lot of people are like, his ego is so fragile that, whatever, he's got such a big ego. No. Remember, he doesn't have an ego. He has a massive amount of self-doubt. Okay, just remember that. So what do you actually do? I asked the men over time, what do you do in that situation? And came up with, based on what they told me, we named it the next day rule. And there's two parts of the next day rule. The first thing to ask yourself is, what is going on today that I want to correct or change or mention important enough today that it's going to matter the next day? Is it that important? Because the calculus that you're making, is it worth hurting my husband's feelings today because it's going to matter enough the next day? And so, for example, we hear all these examples of, the husband who got the kids ready for virtual school, and then the wife realized, oh my gosh, he didn't realize that the school has a regulation. They have to kind of be in school clothes. They can't be in ratty t-shirts or whatever, and they'll get demerits, they'll get points. That's worth saying, oh honey, I'm so sorry, you probably didn't realize, because, you wouldn't want the kids to do something, and the husband wouldn't want the kids to get in trouble for that. That's the kind of thing that, okay, that is gonna matter the next day, so it's worth mentioning it today. However, the second part of the next day rule is, if at all possible, mention it the next day. Now, the helping the kids with the virtual school, that's not an example of that. That has to be mentioned right then. But most of the time, if it is that important, it's something that you can say the next day. Give him the fact that he did, he wanted to please you, and he did something that he was trying to help, cleaning the kitchen, whatever it was. And give him that appreciation. And then, if possible, the next day, say, thanks again for doing that. By the way, can I mention something? And recognize it's still going to be a bit of feel like a criticism. I mean, to some degree, there's no way around that. But if it's that important, that's usually the best way to mention it. So that, and I think of my son as an example of this. When he was learning how to load the dishes in the dishwasher, we were trying, he didn't necessarily do it right all the way. And I would start saying thank you right then. And I would see him I watched out of the corner of my eye once as I said, thank you, buddy, good job. And he's this little guy, And I turned away and I watched out of the corner of my eye as he goes, and he walks away like this. He was so proud of himself, right? So I didn't want to take that away from him by saying, that kind of wouldn't get clean this particular way. So the next day, I would say, honey, thank you again so much. Let me show you how you can do it even better to get them even more clean. And you can't stack the bowls on top of each other and still get clean. So it's that kind of thing that matters that we don't necessarily realize. Now, I'm running out of time, but let me mention one other sort of brief piece of the puzzle around this, because I think I have a minute or two just to... I have 10. Okay. I thought you needed an hour for... Okay, all right. We'll split the difference. See, it's all about compromise. Can you tell? Okay, we'll split the difference. So remind yourself, as just sort of another piece of this puzzle, remember why. Constantly remember why thank you is so powerful and perceived criticism or telling him what to do is so difficult. Remember that inside our strong, confident-looking men, and we think you guys are so confident in yourselves, right? You've pulled the wool over our eyes. We really believe this about you. Recognize that's just a mask. And on the inside, there's so much vulnerability and so much self-doubt, where a guy, basically the internal monologue of a guy is I want to tackle a challenge, I want to do great, I want to do great things, I want to be a great husband, I want to be a great dad, a great salesman, whatever, but I'm really not sure I know what I'm doing and I hope nobody finds out. And that vulnerability and that insecurity is always running underneath the surface, and we don't realize it. I'll give you an example of this. So I was on an airplane. Of course, this was all pre-pandemic. I was on an airplane, and this particular day, I happened to get upgraded to first class, which is the best thing in the world, because, And the guy sitting next to me in first class, we were sitting in the first two seats. And you know that seat, if you walk onto an airplane, it's the first thing you see. And every person coming onto the airplane after us was going, hey, buddy, and high-fiving the guy sitting next to me, and hey, good to see ya, and he was, hey, Charlie, and finally, after about 20 or 30 people, I'm like, who are you? And it turns out this guy was the CEO of a company I had actually heard of because they had won Inc. magazine's Best Employee Engagement study for 7 or 8 years running. And this CEO had taken it from a demoralized company to this company that everybody loves working for. It was this guy and his strategies that had done that. And he was taking all of, some of his leadership team or different people in the company to another city for their big annual convention. And so that's why everybody on the plane seemed to know him. And so we started talking about this topic. And he said, it is so true. He said, I've been the CEO of this company now for 8 years or 9 years, whatever it was. And he said, and I live, I sit in the top of a skyscraper. I have the huge executive office. I have my big mahogany desk and the windows behind me. And he said, I am convinced that my 5th grade teacher is going to open the door and walk into my office and go, what are you doing here? Because of that question inside all men. It doesn't matter how wonderful of a husband he is. He questions whether he's a good husband for you. It doesn't matter how good of a salesman he is. He questions whether he's going to let go tomorrow because he made a mistake. This is a very, very deep question that we have to recognize is going on. It's a raw nerve that we can hit. Here's what this CEO said. It turns out I actually had a copy of my book in my bag with me because I was going to a speaking engagement at a women's conference, and he grabbed it. He's like, wait, I've seen this book. And he said his wife had read it to him on their vacation. And he said, amazingly enough, he said, when she got to some of the parts about the inner question, he said, I started tearing up. And as he's talking to me on the plane, I start seeing a tiny bit of emotion in his eyes. And he said this. He said, what did he say? Hold on. Where he is. He said, my wife now gets this. She didn't used to. But there is something so powerful when you can let your guard down, let yourself be yourself, make mistakes, and know that the most important woman in your life believes in you and admires you anyway. So powerful, ladies. We just don't realize it. There's so many opportunities for us to send that message that you're not a good dad, you're not a good husband. I know we're getting to the point where I have to wrap up. Let me give you one more example. This is an area that hits a lot of people, and it's in parenting. When Jeff and I were young parents, and our daughter was about 18 months old, maybe, I think the story is, Jeff was taking her to the little playground that was right behind our house. The neighborhood playground was right near our house. And I was inside working on a book or a column, one of my newspaper columns or something. And all of a sudden, I hear this like high-pitched shrieking. That's the only way I can describe it. And of course, I go running around the house. I can't figure it out. I go running around the back of the house to the neighborhood playground. And I see Jeff with Morgan pushing her on the swing so high that it looked like she was going to go around the bar. And she wasn't shrieking, she was squealing with delight.
She's an adventurer.
And she wasn't in a safety seat. Okay? And so I go running around, and I'm like about to shout out, "What are you doing?" Okay? And it was almost like God grabbed me by the back of the neck and pulled me backwards. And I suddenly had to stop and go and force myself to go, remember respect, remember respect. Believe in your husband. He loves his daughter. He doesn't want her to die. And I had to force myself to go, if I go running up and do what instinct is telling me to do and snatch her away from him and go, "What are you doing?" Is he ever going to be willing to take her to the playground again? Maybe, but it might not be the same. And I had to force myself to turn around and go back inside and trust my husband and trust that he loves his little girl, and he's just different. Anthropologists around the world have found that in every single culture around the world, this literally is not a socialized thing. This is in every single culture. Fathers will let a toddler child get 3 times further away from them than a mom will. Because we as moms are, now there's exceptions to this, obviously, right? Remember the 80-20 thing. But most of the time, statistically, we women are more likely to be like that, kind of more protective when they're that age. Like, okay, it's okay. Oh, oopsie, okay, you're good. And the guys, the husbands, the fathers are more likely to be like, go, fly. If you skin your knee, suck it up. And get back up and keep going. And kids need both. And we have to recognize in the heart of these men, there is this huge desire to be a great husband and father. And that this is something for us to affirm. So I hope that gets you started with some of the practicalities. Just watch. Come all the way back to watch for those ways that we can be inadvertently sending that negative message and how we can send the positive message instead.
Isn't she awesome? I mean, really.
Aw.
True. Okay, so now we're going to flip it. The way I'm going to present this is we've learned that it gets presented a little differently than the way Shaunti presents for women because, yeah.
I feel like we've heard all we need to hear.
Yes.
I just said, could we just stop the conference now? I feel we've heard everything we need to hear. We're good, right, guys? Are we good? No, we aren't. We need to hear this. Carry on.
That's awesome. So when Shaunti talks to women's conferences, she can talk for sometimes 3 hours on this topic.
Oh, yeah.
And women will sit there and go, this is amazing. So I came late to the game on this, so that's the way it's done. So I would, when we would do a conference together, I would just present information after information, and the guys would come up to me afterwards and go, with this kind of glazed look on them, and they'd say, that was good, but really, if you could just tell me what to do, I'd be good with that. You know what, give me a business plan, and I can execute. So we're going to talk a little bit about the why, and then it's going to be heavy on the to-dos. So remember the whiteboard? Remember the core insecurity that Shaunti said that women have? Now, for us as guys, it doesn't come as any huge surprise. We've heard this for so many years, that our wives, the women in our life, they need to feel loved. What is the surprise is how easy it is for them not to. And for example, there seems to be this question that is running in the back of women's minds. And these are women who are in good relationships or bad. It really didn't matter statistically. It was this question, does he really love me? Would he choose me all over again? And now as guys, we're probably thinking, well, that must have happened before you got married. Because when you got married, I told you I loved you. And what Shaunti says is, it doesn't change. It actually just morphs into another question, which is he really happy he married me? Would he choose me all over again? And for me, it was just, and probably for most of you guys out there, that just seems so odd. I don't have a grid for it, because when Shaunti and I did get married, I told her I loved her. And knowing, and she told me she loved me. And the question seemed to be answered. At that point, it just didn't come up in my mind. If we're having an argument or a disagreement or anything, that question doesn't arise.
And for women, what men don't realize is that her just walking down the aisle and saying, I do, there is no switch in a woman's brain that gets flipped to the, oh, now I feel permanently loved position. Like she has this question, am I lovable, every day. And so she's looking kind of subconsciously for the answer to that
And
every day.
So this is part of the why. But let me give you first an illustration of kind of how this works. So let's say that Shaunti and I are having a discussion over breakfast one day. You know, those types of discussions. And the temperature in the kitchen is getting a little heated, and we're starting
maybe emotion, maybe I'm crying a little bit or upset.
Yeah, and then I look at my watch and I go, oh man, I have a client meeting that I have to get out to. So I excuse myself and I get in the car, back down the driveway. And guys, what happens in my mind as I am driving away from the house? What am I thinking about with respect to that argument that Shaunti and I have just had? What do I do with it? It's gone. Exactly. It's gone because now I'm in work mode and I have a client meeting that I have to prepare for and get ready, and that's what I'm thinking about. And, you know, then I go throughout my day, and as I drive home later that night, if I'm honest with myself, I'm hoping Shaunti has forgotten all about it. Has that happened?
Ladies, all the women are shaking their heads.
So take them through what has happened inside of you.
So here's what's happened. And guys, this is not, again, 100%, but it's a goodly number, well north of 80%, depending on the survey. Is that all of that question that was subconscious, am I lovable? Does he really love me? Would he choose me all over again? Are we okay? All of that was back there, but now it's been triggered. And it's sort of risen up and it's kind of roiling in her gut. And it's this feeling like, that's the technical term, by the way. That's what it feels like. And it's this question of, are we okay? And that's going to circle until she's reassured.
Until she feels that
We're okay.
are okay.
Yeah.
Now, for us guys, I mean, honestly, one of the huge surprises with this through the research was how frequent these feelings can occur inside of Shaunti and in other women, and the magnitude of the discomfort that it feels like. And I struggled, honestly. How do I explain this to guys? What's a grid that we can run this through? And so I started to try to come up with some illustrations. And this is the best I can come up with. For guys, most guys, and I would say almost all guys, if I ask this question, and I used to do this, I would say, how many men out here have never had to worry about their career, their job, how they're going to provide for themselves or their family? Those thoughts just never come up. And when I would ask for a show of hands for that, never did any guy ever raise his hand at that one.
Well, we had one man raise his hand. We were in Wichita, Kansas, doing a conference for like counselors, pastors, whatever, on this topic. And he said, how many of you feel like you've never had to worry about, you're never going to have to worry about providing for your family? And one hand went shooting up in the front row, and everybody went, and it was a Catholic priest.
So outside of that niche group of Catholic priests, for the rest of us guys, we can kind of understand what this feeling is like in the back of our minds that's similar to what's going on for them when they're worried or concerned about us and our relationship. So what I would ask guys, or actually one guy put it perfectly. He said, well, of course I have to be thinking about this stuff. Of course it's always there. I mean, if I'm working at a job, our company could lose its biggest accounts and clients. The economy could go south. Or, if I'm honest, I could be 3 or 4 mistakes away from getting fired. So it's always there. And as I was recounting that story to a group of women in a focus group, when I said that, one woman raised her hand and said, that is exactly how we feel about our relationship with you guys. We could be 3 or 4 arguments away from this thing starting to go south on us. So we're always vigilant about
subconsciously
making sure that we're okay. So that's kind of the why, and there's these triggers that cause that thought to move from the back of her mind to the front. And we've just given you one right now. Let me give you a couple of others. So the first one, conflict, pretty self-evident. The next one is Jeff's preferred way of handling every conflict that I have with Shaunti, which is withdrawal. One is because Shaunti and I are so different in the way we process things mentally, if we're having an argument, I need to get away because I don't know what I'm feeling. And she'll say sometimes like, just tell me what you're feeling. And I'll go, I don't know.
I'm like, how can you not know what you're feeling, right?
All I know is that inside me, things are going wrong, but I can't find the words to explain it. So that's one. The next one, which is really quite peculiar, because it's silence. Now, I'm more on the introvert scale than Shaunti is. I like being quiet. I like not talking. But as one woman said, when my husband is quiet, it must be about me. And so that fear gets triggered in that when it really could just be about his favorite sports team lost. And that's all it is. But it runs through this grid that are we okay? And his silence is an indication that we're not. So what do we do about these things? There's a couple of things that I want to approach. There's really two ways that we can handle this, guys. There is, what do we do when the trigger's already occurred? There is this feeling that has moved from the back of her mind to the front, and she's anxious, she's worried about our relationship. What do we do in that case? And then we're going to back away after we talk about that, and we're going to go to what's a preventive sort of measure that we can take. So the first one is, what do we actually do about it? I got to tell you, when I would be sitting in a group and there'd be a speaker up here and they would give some sage advice and they would say something like, this is the magic bullet for this particular thing. If you will do this, it will accomplish this 100% of the time. Now, I would always sit there and I would kind of roll my eyes internally because I'd go, you can't say that. We're all different. We all have different experiences, all of that sort of stuff. But this is the magic bullet, guys, for this particular occurrence. And the reason I can say that with such a level of confidence is because we actually tested it out on the surveys, and research showed that it was
95% of women.
95% of women said that if you will do this thing when you are in the middle of kind of a disagreement, conflict, it will help. Here's what it is. If you will say something like, honey, I'm really upset and angry right now, and I gotta get some space away from this. But I want you to know we're okay. What's just happened?
What's just happened, guys, is you have told her this is just an argument. This isn't the beginning of those 3 or 4 things where things are going to start spiraling downhill and I'm going to start feeling a different way about you. That's all this is this is just an argument. And you've reassured her that we're okay.
Exactly. And that's simple to do. Now put it in your own words, but there is also another important caveat with this one, and that is at some point you actually have to come back and re-engage. But here's the beauty even on that one. Women have said that if he will come back and re-engage in whatever it was that was so uncomfortable for us to talk about, his re-engagement actually matters way more than whatever it was we were upset about in the first place. So that is good news. Now, here's another thing, guys, for you to learn, is that for me and for a lot of guys, it's when we're in the midst of these disagreements, it's hard, as I said, to kind of know what's going on inside of us. And we think that when there's emotions firing on both sides, the honorable and best course of action is to give one another space. And isn't that what you really want?
No. what we found, again, and this is 70-something%. This wasn't a huge, quite as high of a number, but 70-something% of women said that in that environment, they don't need space. She doesn't need space. She needs a hug, right? And I know, guys, you're looking a little alarmed because apparently, when we told this to one group of people in a marriage conference, and one man actually yelled out from the group and said, "You mean hug the porcupine?" And he looked so alarmed. Ladies, I guess we look scary. I don't know. I don't really understand that, but apparently that's what guys think. And it was interesting because in that marriage conference, when the guy yelled that out, "You mean hug the porcupine?" all the women in the group yelled, "Yes," and started clapping. And he saw the guys like, "What?" Like, really? Because truly, if you will take this as a chance to learn, is this true of my wife? And if you ask her, is this true of you in those moments? And she says yes. I know it takes some courage, but try it. Don't believe us. Try it. And you'll see those quills melt, so to speak, and that this is exactly what she needed. Now, ladies, by the way, if you've told your husband that this is something that is true of you, if this does matter to you in those moments, then it is really important that you show him that that matters and that you don't do that thing of, no, you don't care about me, because he will never do that again, most likely. So show him that this matters.
And I got to tell you now to the women, please give us grace in this, because this goes against so much of what we've learned about ourselves and being guys all our lives. So we're trying to learn some new things and new habits, and we really need your understanding as we're learning these. For example, this was a couple of years ago, and Shaunti and I did the research for these books. We wrote these books. We've spoken at marriage conferences. And one particular morning, we are having one of those disagreements in the kitchen before our days start. And she looks at me and says, "This is one of those moments when you hug me." And I was like, "Oh, right. And so we need that. It doesn't come natural for us guys. So just so you know. So those are the things to do once that kind of worry, that insecurity has been triggered in her. But there is a far better course of action than that. And that is, what are things that we can do that prevent that insecurity from arising, even in circumstances where it otherwise would? And it can all be summarized. All of that preventive measure that we can apply, guys, can all be summarized with one single word. And that word is pursuit. And every guy's going, "Okay,
like, what does that mean?
What's that mean?" You know what it means. And actually, you're good at it. You're an expert at it. It is what you did when you were dating to get her to fall in love with you. And now I can see every guy going, "Oh, dang. That was exhausting. I mean, I've got a job now. We have kids. I've got a mortgage. How can I do all of that?"
Remember, there was one guy who came up to us after this talk at a marriage conference. He was like, "I got married so I could stop doing that stuff."
I get it. I feel your pain. But let me tell you, you're thinking of it the wrong way.
Yeah.
Go ahead and tell them how they should think of it.
You're thinking, guys, when you hear that, you're thinking the actual actions that you did. Like you arranged the big romantic candlelight dinner or the picnic in the park or the concert tickets or whatever. Listen, that stuff is great, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about sending a message. Remember the message, the question? I would choose you all over again. You can send her that message by reaching across and taking her hand when you're walking across a parking lot. That says, I would choose you all over again. You can when you're sitting together at church, putting your arm around her in church says, "You're mine. I'm so glad I married you." Okay, I just saw a guy back there go, "Good job." And now every other guy who doesn't have his arm around his wife is like going, "Dang, like I missed my shot." No, listen. Listen, guys, it's this simple stuff, literally like sending her a text message during the day that says, "Gosh, this has been a really bad day and I can't wait to see you tonight. I love you so much." She'll screenshot and save that text message because it is these little day-to-day things that speak to her day-to-day question.
And we can do these things, guys. We really can. One of the keys, though, is we actually have to get outside of our thinking of how and what we would like as a guy. For example, as we were working on the research for this particular book and chapter, it was, sometime around lunchtime, and we were at home working, and it was, you want to go out and get a sandwich. So we got in the car, we drove down to this little kind of pedestrian mall, strip mall area, and we parked, and Shaunti and I are talking, and as we are walking through the rows of cars to get into the restaurant, Shaunti's in the middle, and I'm next to the cars here, and I notice another car starting to come down the row that we're walking in. And so anyways, I walk over to Shaunti and kind of pull her close to me, and we walk inside the restaurant. The next day, we are with a focus group of women, about 7 or 8 women. They are talking about, me and another guy are the only 2 guys in this focus group because we're kind of the observers to figure out what really is going on inside of women and these discussions. So Shaunti is working this talk, and she's saying, "What are some of the things that your husband can do that signals to you that he loves you and that he wants to be with you?"
Like the text message.
Like the text message, and so all of that. And she's just an example. Jeff and I yesterday went out to get lunch, and we were walking through a parking lot, and he came over to me and put his hand in the small of my back and pulled me close to him as we were walking through the parking lot. And every woman in the focus group went, it never fails. Guys, I didn't get your wives in here beforehand and tell them, when I say this, you got to say that. It happened exactly like that in the focus group. And me and this other guy are looking at each other like, are you kidding me? Because let me tell you what was going through my mind yesterday when we were walking through the parking lot. She's walking here, I see the car, Shaunti's talking, and I'm going, she doesn't see that car. She's not gonna look up, she's not. It's gonna hit her. And I hesitated for a moment whether to go over, not because I wanted her to get run down by the car, but because if our roles had been reversed and she had come over to me and pulled me close like that, I'd go, I see the car. I'm not going to get hit. She had none of that. And I guarantee you, there are things that you hesitate doing with your wife because it wouldn't say the right thing to you if she did it to you. You just got to get out of your head. So here's another example. I'm going to give you a couple other quick examples that give you kind of a framework for what to do in this. So when our kids were little bitty, do you know when kids are little and they watch a particular movie or like a movie on the DVD and they will watch it again and again and again? And that's the way it was with our kids. And the movie in our household at that particular time that was the popular movie for them was The Parent Trap. Not the original Disney one back in the 60s, but the remake in the late 90s with Natasha Richardson and Dennis Quaid.
And Lindsay Lohan, back when she was, sweet and innocent.
Yes, it was a sweet movie. So that was our movie, and we had watched it 50 times. And one particular night, here we are watching it again with the kids for the 51st time, and about midway through, the kids fall asleep. And so we carry them up to their beds, and then we come back down, and finish the movie. If any of you don't know the movie, let me give you a quick summary of it. So it was an American dad, Dennis Quaid, British mom, Natasha Richardson. They fell in love, got married, had identical twins, and then got divorced and split up. And each one of them took one of the twins.
When the kids were babies.
When they were babies. So she went to England, he stayed in California, and neither of the kids knew about the other, didn't know about their parent or anything like this. So in the way only Hollywood can work these things, at some summer camp, they both encounter each other, the kids, and they realize that they're twins, and they begin to cook up a plan to get mom and dad back together again. So here we are in this scene, and so Shaunti and I are sitting on the couch watching this movie, and the scene is Dennis Quaid and Natasha Richardson back together kind of for their first time, and they're having a meal together. And he says, "So what happened to us?"
And she goes, "Oh, Nick, we were both so young, and we both had tempers, and you said things you didn't mean, and I said things I didn't mean, and I went and I got on my very first 747 to go back to London, and you didn't come after me."
And he said,
"I didn't know you wanted me to."
And at that moment, I sat bolt upright on the couch and said, "Can you believe it? If she'd have just said, 'Come after me,' they'd have been together all those 12 years. And it would have been magnificent."
And I'm like, it doesn't work that way. Because if she would have said, "Come after me," she never would have known whether he was doing it because she told him to or because he wanted to. I'm like, and I was telling Jeff, I'm like, you have to understand something about, like, for example, romance novels or romance or rom-com movies. Like, I'm not so much a romance novel kind of reader, but I've watched enough movies and read enough books with kind of those plot lines to know they're read by women so much because they have one plot. Just one. Like, all of those things have one plot. It's boy meets girl, boy and girl fall in love, have this great relationship starting, and then something goes wrong, right? Like, there's some misunderstanding, something happens to hurt her feelings, and she goes weeping away, and she never has to go, "Come after me," because the boy is always like, "No, I'm not gonna let you get away." And he goes and he runs after her and pulls her back. And that speaks to that question of, does he really love me?
And so I know, guys, and I've been there is this, but she's just playing a game. She just wants me to do that. And you gotta look at it. Remember, believe the best about your spouse. And the fact is, she has different insecurities than you do, and she needs you to pursue her and come after her.
And that pursuit is truly not just in those moments when she's upset, although that's part of it. It really is during those little things, all the stuff that Jeff was talking about earlier. Ask your wife, like we did in the focus group, what are those little things that say that to you?
Yeah, exactly. Now, one other thing that says this to our spouse is that they're questioning, am I beautiful? They want to actually hear those words. You know, when we were talking in the focus group, I was telling this group of women that our daughter at the time, who was maybe 4 years old or 5 years old, and I said, you know, I try to tell her every day, or at least every other day, how beautiful she is. Because I want her to know inside and out that she is beautiful, so that when she's grown, she won't go looking for affirmation of that in the wrong places, that she will be self-confident enough in that. And so one of the women said, so you say that to Shaunti like that too, right? And I went, well, no. And they said, why not? And I said, well, she's a grown-up. You know, she's capable, competent, all of those good things. And this woman looked at me and she said, look, we're all just little girls inside. And we're looking for the most important man in our life to tell us that. Now, when the book first came out, we were doing a number of television shows and interviews and stuff like that. One particular one that we were doing, the producer was interviewing us beforehand, before we went on camera. And we were talking kind of about some of the findings and just about this, about how important it is for our spouse to know that we find them beautiful. And he said, here's a quick story. And I love telling this story because it really gets at it. He said, when my wife and I were married in the first 4 or 5 years of our marriage, I was working in a producer role, television producer role, and I got to tell you, it paid next to nothing. We were pretty broke all the time. But we had committed to each other that we would find one night every 2 weeks to go out, just the two of us. We would get one of our sets of parents, to watch the kids. We had 3 kids under 5, and we were tired all the time, had good excuses not to do this, but we committed to do this. And we used to always go to this same little kind of hole-in-the-wall pizza place. He said it was truly nothing special, but it was our place. He said it was the kind of place that when you walk in, they have a chalkboard, and they would write trivia on the chalkboard. Now, this is pre-Google, and if you got the trivia question right, you got a free soda with your pizza. So he says, we walk in this particular night, and the trivia question is a sports question, and he said, true confessions, I know nothing about sports, but I knew this answer. I just couldn't remember it. So here was the question. Famous Notre Dame football coach who coached the Gipper. And he said, I knew that. So we order our pizza, we sit down, and I am working to pull that thing up from the recesses of my memory. And my wife is talking, and I'm kind of nodding and just listening a little. And finally, the pizza comes, we're sitting there, and it comes to me. I don't know what happened, but I just blurted out. And I go, Newt Rockne. And she looks at me kind of quizzically, and then she starts to kind of flush a little. And as we're talking more, she's kind of happy and fizzy, he said. And I finally went, so what's going on with us right now? And she looked at me and said, you've just never said that to me before. Okay. What exactly have I never said to you before? And she said, you rock me. Right, you do. And he said, honestly, 5 or 6 months later, when I came clean to her, we had a great laugh about that. And now, whenever I want to tell her how beautiful she is, I simply say, Newt Rockne. And, you can find these things, guys. And if you will do those little things, he was doing the right thing. He was calling, having this night together, prioritizing her. And if you will practice these little things, I guarantee you will get credit for boneheaded things that you do that she'll think is so sweet. So just practice it. You can do it. This next topic, we'll do really brief on it. But it is one of the topics that, quite frankly,
because I don't want to run too much out of time.
Help explain. I think we're going till 11:30, or is it 11:45?
Because the clock is telling us we have 15 minutes. I thought we had 30 more minutes.
Yeah.
So just somebody tell us how long we have. Okay.
Okay.
Pastor Ron can tell us.
Give us the shepherd's crook if we go
Use
too
the
long.
crook.
Exactly.
Yes.
So this next topic is helping us as guys explain something that's so curious and baffling about our wives. And it centers around the differences between men and women in how we process thoughts and emotions. So let me give you an example. And the illustration is, if we think of our brains as a computer desktop, I'll describe, guys, how we look at things first, and then we'll turn it over to the women. So if we think of our brains as a computer desktop, when we have some thought some feeling, something that we're pondering, we usually have one window open at a time. We work on it.
One thought, one feeling.
Arrive at our conclusion, solution, whatever you want to call it, and we click the X and we open up another window. One after another, very sequential. It feels right to us. If we look at our wife's desktop, it's like they have 10 windows open at the same time, and they are bouncing between those 10.
10 thoughts, feelings, worries, etc.
And they can do it. I mean, it's just the way that the human brain is wired differently between men and women. They can do that, and it works for them. And now go with me on this one a little, because
you're going to get yourself in trouble
with
what you're about to say here.
But then it's like their desktop has been infected with a virus or spyware. Because another window pops up that they don't want there.
Like a worry about, are the kids okay?
So they click the X and make it go away. And then it pops back up again. They click the X to make it go, and it keeps popping back up. Whereas for us guys, remember, as I drove away from our argument in the morning, I clicked the X and it went away and it stayed away. That's not what happens for you.
For most women, what we found, I think it was 87%, 89%, some number like that. For most women, we can't, the way our brain is wired, and there's a ton of neuroscience behind this, so we don't have time to get into, but most women can't just stop thinking about something because they decide to stop thinking about it.
Even though we as guys give you that advice, we say, honey, just don't think about it. Right?
Oh, that's so helpful. Because what you're saying is click the X. For most women, like I said, somewhere upper 80s, we can't just not think about it. In most cases, we have to take some action to resolve it. Can I give the garage door
example? Please do.
Okay, so example, you're driving away to a movie back when we were allowed to be at movie theaters, okay? You're driving away to a movie and your wife, you get about 10 minutes from the theater and she starts going, did I close the garage door? I can't remember. Did I close the garage door? Now, it's easy for you to say, honey, just don't think about it. Now that you know this, is she going to enjoy the next 2 hours of the movie as much as she would have? Instead, it makes all the difference in the world if you will, this is going to sound kind of bad, instead of sort of making her feel foolish that she can't stop thinking about something because, she has a female brain, instead of sort of making her feel foolish for it, instead switch it and go, this is my chance to earn major brownie points. And say, is there something that would make you feel better? Like, is there something that we can do? Is there something that would help you be able to sort of close that window? And it could be as simple as, you want to call the folks across the street and have them look out the window and see if the garage door is closed. Like, those kinds of things, believe it or not, guys, that makes her feel so loved because it's helping her close a window.
So, guys, I know this sounds somewhat theoretical because we kind of go like, but I don't know how that works. I don't know how it feels, what it feels like. Actually, you do. You just reserve it for something different than what our wives think about. So let me give you this scenario. It's Friday afternoon. It's 5 o'clock. You're working away in your cube, and your company has really had a bad week. It's major client that kind of amounts to over 50% of the revenue for the company that you worked with is gone to a competitor. And your boss swings by your cube at 5 and says, hey, Jeff, I'm going to need to see you in my office first thing Monday morning. Have a good weekend. So now you get home and you tell your wife about this, and she goes, well, it's the weekend. There's nothing we can do about it, so.
Just don't think about it.
How helpful is that? Because we reserve, those worries, because it hits us. where we are most vulnerable, kind of in that need to provide, that need to be valued, and it feels awful. And all weekend, you have that thought popping back in your mind, even though you don't want it there. You know there's nothing you can do about it, but it feels bad.
And you can't just click the X.
You just can't.
So now, can I give them the example, the relationship example? Okay, now guys, imagine, now put yourself back. Your boss has just walked away with that comment. Can I see, I need to see you first thing in my office Monday morning. And all of a sudden, you've got that open window. Oh my goodness. Now imagine, 5 minutes later, your boss comes back by your cube and goes, Jeff, I think I left you with the wrong impression. The reason that I need to see you first thing Monday morning is, this has been a bad week, but we've been pursuing a new client that's coming in, and we're going to want to make sure you're on that team, and so that's why I wanted to see you Monday morning. So just FYI, how grateful are you to your boss? That is exactly the same thing your wife feels when you reassure her before, for example, you drive away to work and leave her going, are we okay? When you will stop and go, look, this is just an argument. I need space. I need to get to work. Whatever it is, we're okay. That is the same gratitude that you would feel for your boss. It's that same thing because you've helped her close a really profound open window.
Let me share another illustration that we've kind of worked out as we were doing the research on the importance and why money can so often cause conflicts in relationships.
Our last project. So this is an example, this is a story right from our life. And it ties kind of the relationship stuff, the money stuff together. So we are self-employed. So we have kind of a funky insurance thing where, not everything is covered. Very few things are covered, except catastrophic stuff. So here we are. It's late at night, and you know the scenario with little kids. One walks into your bedroom at 10 o'clock at night and says, Mom, my throat's kind of sore. Immediately, my throat hurts.
What's your thinking?
Oh my gosh, it could be strep throat. It could be something that, we probably should think about. Do they have a fever? Yeah, okay, maybe we should take her to the doctor. And then all of a sudden, all the open windows open, right? Like, okay, if she's got strep, well, she definitely can't go to school then, and I have all these meetings and this big report that's supposed to be due, so how am I gonna get childcare? And all the windows go open at that moment.
And for me, I'm sitting there going, our insurance isn't going to cover this. It's all out of pocket. Out of 8 out of the last 10 strep tests that we've done, we're negative. This is going to cost $150. So I would use this line with Shaunti, and I'd say, look, pioneer children didn't run off to the doctor every time they had a sore throat.
And they died.
Yeah, that's what she came back with. So I never really had a counter to that. But the fact of the matter was we were both trying to solve and close a window that we had. I thought, and quite frankly, when she would take the kids to the pediatrician and the strep test would come back negative, I gotta tell you, I was annoyed. And it wasn't like I would have been happy if they had stress because we'd have gotten our money's worth. It was the fact that I felt like we wasted money solving a problem that wasn't really a problem. Because for me, the technical problem was, do they have strep or don't they have strep? For Shaunti, the technical problem was,
do they have strep or don't they have strep? And are we going to have this cascade of all these issues that have to be solved? And now I'm going to be up all night, and there's this lack of peace. And if we wait 2 or 3 days, I have all those open windows open. So for me,
spending $100 to close all of those windows was of tremendous value. And so here's the tension that we sometimes feel in our relationships around money is that her wanting to close her open windows oftentimes opens mine.
That's what we found in the money book.
Because it's on the money
research.
side. So that's where we have to just kind of talk about these things. And when we do that, we'll both arrive at the right solution. Okay,
Yep.
So do we want to venture in?
I really want to do a little bit of the time on the sex topic.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Let's do it.
Okay, just really briefly, both sides. Now, this is the very beginning of the story. There's a lot that we're learning in this new research project that goes far beyond this, but it turns out that both men and women tend to have a big misunderstanding about the other person when it comes to this topic. And just really super high level, we women, we think of physical intimacy in our marriages as being primarily a physical need for him. That's kind of the category we put it in, honestly. It's sort of like it's a physical need, it's a physical urge. And if you've been working all day or you've been running around after kids all day, sleep seems like a physical need too, right? And instead, when I started asking the men, what's the importance of this in your life? What I heard from the men had nothing to do with the physical. Really, nothing. What I heard from the men was this enormous emotional need that they couldn't get met any other way. And ladies, here's what the need is. It's the need that almost every man, it's statistically close to 100, it wasn't 100, but almost every man has to feel that his wife desires him and that she wants him. And if a man feels that, it turns out it gives him a sense of kind of confidence, actually. It gives him a sense of well-being, but in all the other areas of his life. It's not just in the bedroom. And it works in reverse, by the way, that often if he doesn't feel desired, if he feels like it's a little too easy for her to say, you know what, I'm just really tired, it gives him this feeling like, I must be so undesirable, I can't even compete with her pillow. Like this really kind of slightly depressing feeling. And it leads to this sort of sense of kind of depression-ish, like this lack of well-being, this sense of lack of well-being in the other areas of his life. It's really interesting. One of the guys on the survey, I thought he captured it perfectly. He said, I don't think my wife realizes that what happens the night before in the bedroom, it absolutely impacts how I feel about myself the next day at the office. It's this powerful thing. Now, obviously, we have to understand and sort of work with our own situation, and not everybody is going to be in the same situation. About 18% of couples are reversed, where she has a higher desire. But in general, this really is a powerful emotional thing.
Can you talk just,
Not just a physical
on
one.
the duty aspect of it?
Sure, yeah.
I mean, I think it's helpful.
Okay, yeah, this is, getting real. There are many women, not all, but many women, even if they're not sort of feeling like it, they're kind of going to think to themselves, okay, I'll do my duty, right? And the men, it was fascinating. I had one guy, when I was talking about that dynamic a little bit, and he said, look, I am sorry. A man would rather go out and clip hedges in the freezing rain than make love to a wife who seemed to be responding out of duty. And that was pretty early on in the research when the guy said that, and I actually went to Jeff and I said, I don't get it. He'd still be getting sex. What's the problem? and actually, Jeff, he put it really well. He said, you're not getting it. If she's only responding because she has to, he's being rejected by his wife. And it's the deepest form of rejection because it's not just a physical need, because it goes so deep into how a man feels about himself.
And so, guys, now to understand what's going on inside of our wives, because we put this in that bucket of, am I desirable? Does she want me? And we put so much emphasis on that. And what we found,
and that you think if it's not happening,
if it's not happening, that is the
reason.
reason why it's not happening. She doesn't find me desirable. And what we can say is that that's not true. What is really going on is that there are actual physiological differences between men and women, and we just need to approach sex from a different understanding. So can you tell briefly the different physiological?
So it turns out guys, the easiest way, the simplest way of explaining this is that it turns out there's two different types of desire, actually. There's something called assertive desire, which is a desire to pursue sex and to initiate it and think about it all the time and be ready at a moment's notice. Guess who tends to have assertive desire, right? It tends to be tied to testosterone. Although, like I said, some couples are flipped, about 80-20, but it tends to be tied to testosterone. There's another kind of desire, which is called receptive desire. And someone with receptive desire is just as willing, just as interested, and this is really crucial, enjoys it just as much once you've gotten into it and it's happening, but doesn't have the same desire to pursue it or initiate it, and doesn't think about it all the time. And this is actually really the key from a practical standpoint, isn't ready at a moment's notice. Guess who tends to have receptive desire? It tends to be tied to estrogen and other typically female hormones. The person with receptive desire, which again tends to be the wife, but isn't always, but whoever that person is, they just need to be approached differently. Like, she's got to know what you've got on your menu for the evening before you get to the bedroom. So her brain can kind of wake up. She can be thinking about it.
And looking forward to it?
And anticipating
and
and
looking forward to it? Okay.
Yes.
So, because it kind of, when I first heard this, I was going, so you mean we got to warn you? And that didn't feel real good.
It's not warning, it's anticipation. But the thing is, guys, it's a matter of dealing with the real person that you're married to, how God created this person differently from you. So, can I just say, basically, before Jeff is going to close us out, but the thing I hope everybody takes away from this, from just a sort of a fundamental standpoint, I hope you guys can see how much power we've each been given. Like, God has handed us each so much power to build our spouse up or to bring them down without necessarily realizing that's what we're doing, and how much we care about each other. And it's just really an opportunity for us just to learn and have our eyes open to a few things. So our sort of challenge as Jeff brings us to a close here in a second, is truly, if you're not sure about what we've said, if you don't necessarily believe all these things, don't believe us. Try it. Just try it and see what happens. And I think you'll see that the reactions you get are the best incentive to continue.
So good. We've given you over the last night and this morning lots of information. And it's really kind of tempting, if I'm sitting and changing places with you guys, to feel like, oh my gosh, there's a lot on me. I've got to master this stuff. I've got to do it so well in order to whatever. It's not all on you. Sure, there are things that you can do, both of you can do, to seek to understand one another, but it's not just the two of you, because there is another one who's present here that's invested in your relationship and wants to see you thrive. And as I've been thinking about this, I was reminded, over the years, several years ago, I had started a startup company, entrepreneurial bent that I had. I'd left the practice of law a long time ago and was on these startup ventures. And several years ago, I was really excited about one in particular and had a good group of folks around me. And one particular morning, I learned some things that it looked like it had all fallen apart, that the dream was dead. And in those moments, I do what I oftentimes do. I turned my lights off in my home office, and I'd love to say I immediately went into prayer. Actually, I just kind of sat there in the dark and kind of just moaned, I guess, because it felt like such a loss. And it was in that moment that God showed up. And a thought, a vision, a memory, whatever you want to call it, appeared in my mind's eye. And it was a memory of something that had happened over 10 years earlier. And it changed everything. And so what was the memory? Well, here was the memory. Back in 2005, just after For Women Only had come out, Shaunti and I, up to that time, because of entrepreneurial ventures and having left the practice of law, we were in a really tough spot financially. We just didn't have any extra money for anything. And all of a sudden, For Women Only comes out in the fall of 2004, and it becomes a bestseller, and things start to change. Now, we're still in debt come the spring of 2005, but we're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. And Shaunti's starting to get speaking events. And one of the very first speaking events that she got was for a women's conference in Tampa, Florida. Now, we live in Atlanta. And so she says to me, she goes, we haven't had a vacation in 4 years. The kids are little, 4 and 2. She said, what would you say if we went to, after the women's event, we drove up to Orlando and went to Disney World? And I went, let's do it. So the women's event ends Saturday afternoon. We were planning on going to Disney World Sunday morning. Kids know nothing about this. It wanted it to be a surprise for them. So we are driving up Interstate 4, and we're on our way to Orlando. And Shaunti, Saturday afternoon, probably around 4 o'clock, she says, you know what? What do you think? What if we go tonight too? We'll still go tomorrow, but let's see if we can get in tonight. And I'm thinking, sure, call them and see if they have twilight rates. Anyone who knows Disney, they don't have twilight rates. So she calls them and she says, they're open till 9. We can go. We can still get in. By now it's about 5:30 or 6 o'clock. And first miracle that occurs is I agreed. So we pull into the park, and by now it's gotten kind of dark because it's dusky. It's 6 o'clock-ish in the spring. And so we are managing to distract the kids as we are driving underneath all of these signs with mouse ears and everything. And our daughter in the back seat is going, where are we? What are we doing? And we'd respond, you'll see. It'll be great. Trust us. And so we stop, we park, and we carry the kids. I carry our daughter, she carries our son, and we're walking into the park, going through the ticket office. I mean, we're the only ones going that direction at 6 o'clock. And so, again, the kids are going, where are we? What are we doing? And we said, you'll see. You'll love it. It'll be great. Trust us. And so we walk in, and I know that Disneyland and Disney World have different configurations, but we were at the Magic Kingdom in Disney World. And the way you access the Magic Kingdom is you can either get on a ferry and go out to the island, or you take a monorail out to it. And so we go and decide to take the monorail, so we're standing on the platform waiting for the monorail to come. We're the only ones standing there going that direction into the park. And again, the kids ask the same things. So finally the monorail comes. We set them both on one side and we take the other. We're the only ones in the car. And as the car pulls away, it rounds this bend after about 30 seconds of the last Disney kind of hotel. And then it comes around a bend, and off in the distance, lit up against the darkened sky, is
Cinderella's castle. And
those two little kids see that, and they start to
and they just start like jumping up and down with this unbelievable joy and excitement.
And that is the memory that God brought to my mind. when I was at that saddest, most discouraged moment, and I felt he said to me, Jeff, remember how much you loved it when your kids didn't know where they were going, but you said, trust me, it'll be great, you'll see it. And they did. And then,
you said you would have paid
I would have
double.
paid
You
a
would have
week
paid
of
a
Disney
week.
admittances for that look on their faces, for that expression. And then the Lord further said, and remember the joy you took in seeing their joy? That's the joy I'm going to take when you see what I have for you. And that's what I want to leave you with, that truth that our Heavenly Father, no matter where you are on that monorail, if you are in a rough spot right now in your marriage, if you're in a great spot, if you're in a challenging moment and you just find it difficult to find hope, trust His care for you because you're on the right train. You are in your marriage. Stay on it. Stay in it. And our Heavenly Father has a castle. I don't know how long it's going to take before you see it, but if you will stay in it, you will see that, and He will see the joy that you're going to have. So thank you all very much for being here.
Yeah.